Good afternoon, or late afternoon. It's just gone 6 p.m. here on the sunny south of France, and welcome to my LinkedIn Live. And the first LinkedIn Live for my new weekly LinkedIn Live series. You know, it's back 10 weeks ago when I started on about having a plan as we all went into lockdown. And I was going to do so many things, and I actually got a good bit of stuff done. But what I didn't get done was doing things like LinkedIn Live, simply because back in home, as wonderful as home is, the internet connection is pretty poor. So I'm back in Coolwork, our local co-working space, and as we came out of lockdown about a week ago, we started getting set up and getting ready. So I plan to run a weekly LinkedIn Live session around this time on a Thursday, and chatting about various energy transition technology topics. Now, for the first one this week, I'm going to kind of take a bit of a tangent around events. And that's where the title for this week, in terms of will we all end up in a world of our own? But I'll come back to that later. The purpose of this weekly chat, and it's a chat because what I do is I chat to people. Now, for this week, you're stuck with me, but for the following weeks and right through the summer and for a while, I'll be inviting various folks in, and we'll be chatting about different topics. What's going on in the world around the stimulus packages around energy transition, what's going on with startups, specific topics like hydrogen, wind power for ships, nuclear fusion, whatever. I have a whole lot of stuff lined up because I had said I planned to do this before we went, or as we went into lockdown. But I suppose, like everybody, as we went into lockdown, we probably weren't, and I certainly wasn't sure about how it would play out and how much time we'd have and how productive we'd all be. So that's been an eye-opening experience, I think, for all of us. And, you know, two great comments I've heard in the past couple of weeks. One was, you're now working from home. You're at home during a crisis trying to work. I think it was Antonio Santos sent that out. And the other great one was, I was chatting to somebody yesterday, and we were on about, we're all returning to work. And the person said to me, no, we're returning to our workplaces, but we've all been working or trying to work for the past 10 weeks. And that's very true. And how we've worked and how we've adapted has changed. So the main thing that I wanted to chat about here today was just to give you an update on some of the things I've been doing around how we're engaging with people in the new world, the new normal. Not a big fan of the word or that whole new normal thing because it's kind of a different normal. But I wanted to give you an idea of some of the things that I've been playing with and what I've seen as massive events like IBM Think, Microsoft Build, a lot of energy webinars. You know, every company has their own webinars, has their own Zoom meetings, and some excellent stuff out there. Now, when I started out at start of lockdown, I said I'd start playing around with some virtual reality stuff. And if you've been following me for the past couple of weeks or months, you've seen me doing some, I suppose, interesting things and pretty silly things around VR and my digital twin. And as I went through some of the work there, you'll probably have seen some of the videos that I was doing with, say, around IBM Think. But I just wanted to share with you some comments as I've participated, looked at, taken part in a lot of different online events and trying to get the engagement of people on the calls. You know, it's been fascinating to see the entire world get comfortable with doing video calls. You know, every one of you watching this will have been on how many video calls in the past, 2 months. And that at a level we were never at before. And that's been fascinating to watch. What's now interesting to see is people are starting to up their game in terms of how you present things. So I'm here with picture-in-picture, broadcasting live, titles. You know, there's a lot of things under the scenes you can do to start to create more engaging content. And what I found fascinating in the past couple of weeks is I've been learning how to use, and I'll explain some of the tools I'm using later on. As I started looking at how to use these tools, and I was watching videos online, an awful lot of the tips and tricks were coming from teachers, because they're using all these tools to engage with their students, with their classrooms. So a lot of how they engage with people. So that's been fascinating. So back to VR. So I started playing with VR, and the reason I came across VR was probably 7 or 8 years ago, when oil and gas companies were starting to use virtual reality for simulating the emergency response to fires in oil refineries, tankers, nuclear power stations. And obviously the technology has come a long way since, and now it's down to consumer. And I came across the company Spaces, the videos that I did with at IBM Think about how you would create your own virtual environment and how you can interact with the real world, because what I'm pointing to there on that screen with my digital twin is basically the desktop. So it's like doing a webinar, except that instead of me standing in front of the camera, you're looking at me, my avatar. And that's one way of creating some interesting content. Now, a lot of people kind of looked at that and said, yeah, that's cool, that's clever, but we'll never take you serious and whatever. You're too much of a cartoon character. And that's valid, right? And I'll continue doing some stuff in VR. Now, I've also got a full green screen. So I'm going to start over the next couple of weeks looking at myself in real, being filmed in front of a green screen, and then being put into a virtual environment. So instead of my avatar, it's me. So they're just playing out around with some of those technologies. But I suppose the biggest aha moment for me in using the technology in the past, 2 or 8 weeks, was not necessarily creating content, but it was consuming content. And what I mean by that is, if you're watching this at any time or watching any webinar or event, you're looking at your screen at whoever's speaking, but you're in your environment. You're at home, you're at the kitchen, you're out in the garden, you're in the bedroom. As more and people return to their place of work, then you might be in your office. But what you're looking at is, you're looking at a computer screen. Now, I can't really show you or get you to experience this without trying it on, with AR and with augmented reality and virtual reality. You really have to try it out to understand. But what I used the Spaces environment for quite a bit was that instead of watching a webinar, sitting here on my screen, looking at the laptop, I actually broadcast, if you like, the webinar, the page was on the big screen in my virtual auditorium. And I was sitting or standing inside the virtual auditorium with the headset on as I was watching the presentation. And it's a whole different way of consuming content. So it also takes you out of, you're in the event. You're not kind of watching what other emails are popping up on some other laptop or whatever. So I found that whole way of both creating content and consuming content inside in a VR environment fascinating. And I've been chatting to a bunch of people. There's a lot of new tools, new platforms coming out around engaging people. We're going to see a lot of that over the next couple of weeks, months, as this plays out. And one of the big things is around, how do I drive up engagement? How do I get people to chat? And how do I get people to ask the questions? And how do I kind of replace the walking up on a booth at an event or walking up to the speaker or whatever? And how do I do that in this new world where we're all working remotely? So there's a lot of new technologies and a lot of, well, not to say new technologies, but there's some very clever things coming down the lines, a lot of big companies coming out with new platforms. So that's going to be also fascinating to watch, and how you drive engagement and how you get people off into private rooms and for a chat. But how do you orchestrate all that? And how do you moderate all the comments and the questions and whatever? So that's something that's coming down the line. Because let's face it, in my own personal world, I'm down to be at events in September. You have Europe, Inlet Europe on in Milan, over the road from us in October, November. You've got PowerGen in the US. Hopefully I'll be there, and so will many of the people in the industry, but who knows, right? And hence the reason I'm starting up the whole LinkedIn Live, weekly chats, etc. It is a new world. And even if the virus vanished in the morning, I'm wondering, will we ever go back to the same amount of travel? And we have to I need to come meet you, and we need these 10 people in the room, and we need to fly them in, and he needs to come from here, and she needs to come from there. And looking at the diaries, we can meet in 6 months. Whereas now it's like, no, we can have a video call next week. Why wait? If it's important, then just schedule it. So I'm not sure we'll ever go back to the old way of flying around and shaking hands and whatever. I hope we will for some of it, but I think the world's changed. So that's been kind of quite fascinating. Now, I said I'd give a quick update on the kind of tools that I'm using here, because a lot of people have been asking, well, how do you do all this stuff in VR? And I've created a couple of videos on the YouTube channel and stuff, and posted on LinkedIn and various places in terms of how I've been doing that. It's basically I've a new Windows PC, a big gaming PC with lots of horsepower, and using the Windows either mixed reality or the Oculus. We have an Oculus headset as well. Software, you install Spaces on top of Steam VR, and away you go. Now, one of the other interesting things I've seen with a lot of colleagues and friends and whatever, as we've been playing around with all these different technologies, a lot of people now are using the virtual backgrounds in their Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever meetings. But what's quite interesting is that, obviously bandwidth is the key delimiter in terms of the experience that the other person sees. But even if you have great bandwidth, what we're starting to see is a lot of people would have a good laptop or whatever from the work laptop, but it may not have great graphics capabilities. And you see the person moving in the virtual background, and some of the, let's say, there's delay and jitter and lag and all this kind of stuff. So I do think as we go forward and we all start playing more with the virtual backgrounds and picture-in-picture and how we present slides in cool ways and interact with different people, you might need a more beefier laptop or a PC. And that's the reason I went off and got a pretty high-end gaming PC. So I'm here, if you're watching this on LinkedIn Live, it's broadcasting to LinkedIn Live. To broadcast into LinkedIn Live, you need to use a third-party, if you like, streaming service. I use Social Live. I've been using them since I got access to LinkedIn Live, whatever, about 4 months ago. But the way you're watching me here in picture with the titles, and when I go back here and I have the 2 screens and I play the video here again, I'm using a piece of software called ManyCam Studio. And it allows you to take feeds and videos and YouTube videos and all sorts of stuff and mix it up all together, create your own layouts, integrate everything, create titles, timers. I have the different screens, because basically what I'm doing here is that, when I started out, there was an intro screen. Well, that's the intro screen. It's like changing slides, if you like. And yet when I come back and I'm talking to you, I can change the camera. So now when I'm starting to do, let's say, Zoom chats with multiple people, I'll be able to do the same. So you don't just end up with the four squares on the screen and 4 heads. You can add in some graphics, and you can add in, it creates a different environment. Is it better? Hey, you tell me. But I found that fascinating, chatting with a lot of colleagues, as I say, they were saying, I tried with all the virtual backgrounds and the green screens and. But yeah, a lot of it didn't work because the laptop wasn't hefty enough. So maybe laptop sales, what would you say? More powerful laptop sales are going to take a bit of a spike in the next couple of months as people start to play more with these kind of things. Now, for those of you that are very interested in the future of VR and AR and things like that, one of the online conferences that's coming up on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of June is the VR AR Association's Global Summit. Now, these folks run their usual association. They're at the forefront of everything to do with VR and AR. So I'm attending that as an attendee from home. But if you want to see the latest and greatest in terms of what the kind of capabilities, technologies are out there for VR and AR, then that would be one conference if you want to look at something completely different to have a look at online. And one of the reasons I'm joining is that there's quite a few companies there that are talking about, well, the work I've done with the VR and my avatar that's all me in my own world on my own. But even Spaces, the company that provide this, they're working on multi-user. So potentially two of us could be in the theater doing a presentation. So instead of me inviting you to a Zoom call, I invite you to a Spaces call, and our avatars are interacting. You'll see a lot more of that in that the VR AR associations. You'll hear all the latest and greatest in terms of what's going on, what's not. And now some of that technology is incredible, but you do need a full studio for some of that to get it done, right? You're thinking, creative light and magic kind of stuff for some of the technologies they have there. But what I find fascinating is what you can do from home and what you can orchestrate yourself with a bit of software and playing around with the different tools. Because everybody's gone online and it's been fascinating to watch. And people that I know personally that said, I'll never do a video, they're on LinkedIn, they're doing videos, they're doing selfie videos. And to be quite honest, the more of that happens, the better. It is a new world. Now, so we're about 17 minutes in. I wanted to give you an update on what my plans are, because this is kind of the first kickoff and whatever, just as a quick one. So I mentioned that I will be doing a weekly LinkedIn Live chat. I will be bringing in guests. We'll start creating, I created this with a LinkedIn event. So we'll have LinkedIn events, LinkedIn live stream. We'll have multiple people. And that weekly, it'll be a kind of a chat show. That's the plan. It's not death by PowerPoint, and it's not going to be a deep dive into gory technology topics. Because what I do is when I travel around is I chat to people and we chat about specific topics. So you'll see that, and there'll be a calendar coming out for the next probably 3-6 months. I'll also be doing a number of, let's say, deep dive sessions on particular topics. I mentioned earlier around the wind ships, nuclear fusion, blockchain, not gone away. So there's a whole lot of different technologies there. Obviously, a lot of my commercial work with companies has changed, but that's not gone away either. So you'll see me online. Instead of turning up at an event and working with a particular company, I'll be online hosting a LinkedIn Live or doing webinars, moderating sessions, moderating different things, because that whole world has evolved as well, and everyone's looking for that. And there's a number of podcasts that are in the pipeline. I continue with what I call my real work, the consultancy work with a couple of companies. So there's plenty going on. And to be quite honest, I think a lot of people I've been chatting to in the last couple of weeks and months have said, it's not that there's less work. I seem to be working more. We'll all figure out whether we were more productive in the last 8 weeks than we ever were before, but a lot of folks are at home looking after kids and whatever, and it's not that easy. And as I said, I think one of the best comments I heard in the last couple of days was, we were chatting on a call about the return to work, and someone said, no, that's disingenuous to people. People have been working for the last 10 weeks. They haven't stopped working. They've just been working from home. What we're talking about is, as the lockdown around the world eases up in different places, folks are going back to their offices or their place of work. So it's a return to the workplace. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, somebody was asking me, I mentioned earlier about the big events, and I'm hoping many of those big events continue and take place this year, so we get to meet up. But I do think we're going to start to see a lot more local events. So they'll be here in Nice, there'll be a meetup, or in Paris, or in Munich, or in whatever. So as, what would you say, all the travel bubbles and whatever starts expanding out, I would imagine that instead of going off to the 5,000, 10,000 person event to hear whatever, there'll be 100 people meet up on a Thursday evening for a local event. So I do think there's going to be a lot more of that as well. And as I say, let's see how it all plays out, but it's going to be quite fascinating. Now, I'm also using, what do you call it? I have multiple screens here. And to be quite honest, this afternoon was kind of a bit of a trial run as well, because I was trying out this live for the first time. And, in the ideal world, if you were doing this, you would have somebody behind the scenes clicking on all the buttons and making sure everything works. But most of us won't, right? And this is the whole point of trying out these tools and how do you play with them individually. I have another screen. I have screens everywhere. I have another screen here. I'm looking at LinkedIn Live. I just saw Joseph asked a question on, I'm using Social Live. Are there other platforms? I'll post out a comment later, Joseph, on that in terms of there's a bunch of different platforms that allow you, say, broadcast into LinkedIn Live. And with Social Live, you could broadcast into LinkedIn Live, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, whatever, loads of different platforms at the same time, just feed up the feed. And Social Live allows you to create a lot of the picture-in-picture and whatever. I simply went with ManyCam simply because I bought that, whatever, about 6 weeks ago, and I've been playing with it since, and I find it very, very good. And then there's multiple tools. So I'll reply in afterwards in a comment in terms of where you go for LinkedIn Live tools, and then ManyCam. And there's Cyberlink have, I think, UCam. You know, there's multiple different ones out there. And some are you pay for, some you don't. But so that's the plan. A lot of stuff online. Regular weekly chats, and a couple of somebody else asked me earlier in terms of ET Tech Chat. What the hell is that? Is it ET, the ET phone home? No, it's not that guy. Energy transition technology. I had a series early last year where I did some half-hour interviews with a bunch of folks that I know well in the industry, and that's where the whole energy transition technology chats came from. And that's kind of what I do. So I'm not going to be talking about regulations or politics. It's going to be a technology focus, and hence the whole thing around some of the key focus topics going forward. So, you know, there's so many different webinars. There's so much content being created out there. It's fascinating to watch. I'm off next week on a couple of webinars. You know, when I would go to an event before, I typically go off and try and find something that I had no clue about or never heard of before to learn about, some new technology or new product. You can still do that because there's plenty of webinars out there in terms of, I think there's one I got on boiler, optimizing boilers for power plants. You know, that's not normally what I do, but again, there's a lot of content out there. So it is fascinating to see how we're changing, we're adopting. And as I say, this was my first back in the office of the week, first LinkedIn Live. Next week, I'll have one or two guests, and we'll have a decent chat about what we've seen going on in the industry over the past 6 or 8 weeks. And, you know, there have been some amazing things happening in terms of the lights stayed on because of all the utility crews and power and energy workers out there. While we were all at home sitting on couches, these people were out and about keeping the lights on, and that work went on. So, you know, hats off to them. But there's been huge implications in the industry in terms of supply, demand, technology, projects, startups, and whatever. So there's going to be plenty to talk about over the next 6, 8, 10 weeks, and then probably for the foreseeable future. So anyway, with that, coming up on about 25 minutes, when we do the kind of the panel chats and whatever, you're probably looking at a good 30, 45-minute session, because some of the folks that I'll be bringing on, they talk more than I do. So that's going to be a bit of a laugh. And as I say, it's time to move on. I'm not sure it's the new normal, but it's a version of normal. It's a version of the new routine. So it is what it is, and we'll all make the best of it. Right. If you have any comments or suggestions, I've seen some comments more coming in. I need to, what I call it, I can't type and talk at the same time, so I'll follow up on those. But if you have any comments, suggestions, if you see this at any time and you're saying, hey, what's this, what about that? Comments, suggestions, criticism, all welcome. So till the next time, bye-bye.